If you're listening to this and someone matching the description I'm about to give you approaches you on the street, just walk away. Don't be polite. Don't play along. Don't look at what's resting in the palm of his hand. Just turn around and blend into the crowd. It is currently 96 degrees outside my apartment door here in Manhattan. The city is sweating through one of the worst, most oppressive July heat waves in a decade. You can feel the asphalt melting under your shoes, and the air smells like hot garbage and exhaust. But inside my room, I am freezing to death. I'm wearing 3 layers of heavy winter clothes, huddled under a thick down comforter, and my breath is literally fogging up the air right in front of my face. Every time I exhale, a plume of white mist dissipates into the dark room. When I look in the mirror, I don't recognize the person staring back at me anymore. 3 days ago, I was 26 years old. I was in the prime of my life. Tonight, a frail, hollow-eyed old man is looking back at me from the glass. My skin is translucent, mapped with deep sunken wrinkles. My joints ache so badly with arthritis that I can barely type these words out on my laptop, and the vision in my left eye is completely gone, replaced by a milky, solid white film. It all started on Tuesday morning. I was grabbing an iced coffee near the financial district, feeling incredibly good about myself. To understand why this happened to me, you have to understand what I do for a living. I'm a reseller. Tickets, vintage clothing, rare sneakers, estate sale jewelry, antique coins, basically anything I can buy low from someone clueless or desperate, and flip online for a massive inflated profit. I used complex sneaker bots to buy out inventory before real families could get them for Christmas. I monitored estate sales in upstate New York, swooping in to buy family heirlooms from grieving widows for pennies on the dollar, only to list them on eBay before I even made it back to the city. I've never felt bad about it, not once. In New York, you either eat or you get eaten. I considered myself a predator, and the rest of the world was just the herd. That morning, I had just pulled off a major hustle, buying up a massive lot of dead stock sneakers that I knew would net me at least 10 grand in profit by the weekend. I was walking down a relatively quiet side street near Wall Street, sipping my coffee, when he approached me. He didn't look like a classic street scammer, and he certainly didn't look homeless. He wore a perfectly tailored bulk charcoal suit. It looked incredibly expensive, made of heavy wool that should have been suffocating in the blazing July sun. But he wasn't sweating at all. He had this incredibly gentle, polite smile, the kind of expression that instantly lowers your guard and makes you feel safe. He stopped a few feet away from me, gave a polite nod, and asked for directions to the nearest subway entrance. It was a simple, mundane question. I pointed him toward the 456 line just a block away. Instead of just saying thanks and walking off, the man stopped. He bowed his head slightly, his eyes locked onto mine. His eyes were incredibly dark, almost like looking into a pair of bottomless wells. "Thank you, young man," he said. His voice was smooth, deep, and carried a strange, heavy resonance, like old leather sliding across stone. "Your time is valuable in a city like this. Please take this small token for your trouble." He reached out and pressed something into my open palm. The exact moment his fingers brushed against mine, a shockwave of ice-cold energy shot up my arm. It wasn't just cold, it was freezing. It felt like holding a block of dry ice that instantly threatens to burn your flesh. Before I could even gasp or pull my hand away, the man turned, stepped into a passing crowd of tourists, and completely vanished. He was just gone. I stood there on the sizzling concrete, shivering. I opened my hand. Resting in my palm was a heavy, badly tarnished silver coin. It wasn't American currency. It was thick, unevenly stamped, and rough around the edges. On one side, it featured the side profile of a stern, ancient face I didn't recognize. On the other, a faint, primitive engraving of a small boat crossing a river. Being in the resale game, my heart skipped a beat. I didn't care about the strange coldness anymore. I didn't care about the weird vibe of the stranger. I recognized ancient silver when I saw it. This was an ancient Greek opal, a museum-grade artifact that collectors would commit crimes to own. It was easily worth 5 figures, maybe more if I found the right private buyer. My first thought wasn't who was that guy, or why did he give this to me? My very first thought, born out of pure, unadulterated greed, was, I just hit the absolute lottery, and I'm not telling a single soul about it. That was my first mistake, because that coin was never meant for the living. It had been plundered from the eyes of a corpse before it could cross the river Styx, and the ferryman always collects his toll. By mid-afternoon, I couldn't shake the chill of that coin. I had slipped it into my front pocket, but the fabric of my jeans felt frozen against my thigh. I walked into a local sneaker consignment shop in Soho to talk to Marcus. Marcus is a competitor friend, the kind of guy you grab a coffee or a beer with just to see what kind of inventory he's holding so you can find a way to undercut him. We smiled to each other's faces, but we both wanted to see the other fail. Marcus noticed me immediately. I was rubbing my hands together, shivering in the middle of a shop that had its AC broken. The store was 90 degrees, and I looked like I was trapped in a blizzard. "Dude, what is wrong with you?" Marcus laughed, leaning over the glass counter. "You look like you're coming down with the malaria. It's literally boiling outside." "Just a sudden chill," I lied, my teeth clicking together. I reached into my pocket to grab my phone, but my fingers accidentally brushed against the silver coin. Without thinking, I pulled it out and started flipping it over my knuckles, a nervous habit I've had since I was a kid. The second Marcus's eyes dropped to my hand, his smug, condescending grin completely vanished. He froze. "Where the hell did you get that?" His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. He reached out to grab it, but I instinctively pulled my hand back, slipping the coin back into my pocket. "Just picked it up at a flea market over the weekend," I lied smoothly. "Some old lady didn't know what she had." "Why, you recognize it?" Marcus stared at me, his face dead serious, completely devoid of his usual arrogance. "Dude, put that away. Seriously. My grandfather immigrated from Greece, and he used to tell me old superstitions from the Mediterranean when I was a kid. He was terrified of those." I forced a laugh. "It's just an old silver coin, Marcus. It's worth a couple of grand tops." "No, it's not just a coin," Marcus said, leaning in closer, his eyes scanning the shop to make sure no customers were listening. He said some ancient silver coins carry a heavy generational weight. They were called obols. In the ancient world, they were placed directly on the eyes or inside the mouths of the dead. It was the exact fee required to pay Charon, the ferryman, to carry the soul across the river Styx into the afterlife. My grandfather swore that if a living person takes an obol that was stolen from a corpse, they end up paying the toll themselves. The coin drains your life force because it belongs to the underworld. He told me it's a trap, a curse specifically drawn to the greedy. It finds people who take things that don't belong to them. I laughed it off, called him a superstitious idiot, and walked out of the shop. But as I walked back to my apartment, Marcus's words began to echo in my mind. The cold from my pocket was spreading now. It had crawled up my thigh, into my torso, and down my left arm. When I finally got back to my apartment and walked into the bathroom to wash my face, I froze. A stark, bright white line ran through the side of my hair, a perfect strand of gray. Panic, cold and sharp, started to set in. I locked my door, sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and fell down a dark, endless rabbit hole. I bypassed the standard coin grading sites and began searching obscure ancient history forums, occult message boards, and old archives of urban legends. I typed in everything. Ancient coin cold to touch, silver coin old man suit, rapid aging curse. It took me hours of digging through dead links and deleted threads. But around midnight, I found an archived post from 2018 on a forgotten paranormal forum. The thread was titled, "He wore a charcoal suit. Do not take the silver." My hands began to shake as I read it. The user, an account named AlphaFlips88, described the exact same polite stranger in the exact same tailored suit near the financial district. He wrote about the freezing cold coin that never warmed up. He wrote about day one, the sudden unnatural chills and the first streaks of gray hair. He wrote about day two, how his joints began to lock up, how his skin began to sag, and how his vision turned cloudy and milky, starting with his left eye. It matched my symptoms perfectly. I looked down at my left hand. The skin around my knuckles was already starting to look loose, dry, and wrinkled. But as I scrolled through the thread looking desperately for a cure, my heart sank. There was no solution listed. Instead, the post was a frantic, terrified log of failed attempts to break the curse. Alpha Flips 88 wrote about trying to melt the coin down with a blowtorch, but the metal wouldn't even get warm. He wrote about throwing it into the Hudson River, only to wake up the next morning with the coin resting right on his nightstand, soaked in brackish water. Finally, his last post detailed a method he had found on a trending viral thread about urban protection rites. It was called the Salt Circle Burial. He swore it was a foolproof way to neutralize cursed objects. The post described how he had gone to a local park in the dead of night, dug a 6-inch hole, surrounded it with coarse sea salt, poured natural water over it, buried the coin, and walked away without looking back. The final edit on the post was written 3 hours after the ritual. It was short, chaotic, and terrifying. "It didn't work," it read. "I thought I was safe. I thought it was over. But it's back. It's back in my pocket. It's so cold I can't breathe. My chest is tight. I can hear knocking on my front door. He's coming for the rest of it. God help me, he's here." The account went completely dark after that. No more posts, no more comments ever again. With a heavy pit in my stomach, I used my reselling OSINT tools to do some deep background digging on the username Alpha Flips 88. It didn't take long to connect the account to a real identity. A high-profile real estate liquidator from Brooklyn named Thomas. I looked up his name in old digital newspaper archives. Thomas had made millions by ruthlessly exploiting loophole laws, illegally evicting elderly tenants from rent-controlled buildings, and buying up foreclosed properties from ruined families to flip them to overseas investors. He was notoriously heartless, proud of his greed, and incredibly wealthy. And according to a local news article dated exactly 3 days after his last forum post, Thomas had died suddenly in his luxury penthouse apartment. He was only 33 years old. But the most horrifying part of the article was the cause of death. The medical examiners were completely baffled. They stated that his internal organs, his bones, and his cellular structure resembled those of a 100-year-old man who had suffered from extreme rapid senile decay. They couldn't explain how a healthy 33-year-old could age a century in a matter of days. That was the moment the absolute crushing truth hit me like a physical blow to the chest. The spirit doesn't choose its victims at random. It doesn't target innocent people. It targets the parasites, the hoarders, the inherently greedy. It targets people like Thomas, and it targets people like me, people who built a life out of taking, stripping away from others, and keeping the spoils for themselves. The silver coin wasn't just a random curse. It was a mirror reflecting the rot inside our own souls. But I was in denial. I didn't want to believe that my life was over. I convinced myself that Thomas had just performed the ritual wrong. Maybe his salt wasn't pure enough. Maybe he looked back when he walked away. I told myself that I was smarter than him, that I was more precise. I was a professional coordinator. I could pull this off. It was already day 2. My left eye was completely blind, covered in that horrific milky veil. I could barely walk without a cane. I didn't have time to think. I grabbed a small trowel from my balcony, a brand new container of coarse sea salt from my kitchen, and a bottle of spring water. I dragged my aching, rapidly aging body down the stairs of my building and hailed a cab to Central Park. The cab driver kept looking at me in the rearview mirror with a look of intense pity and discomfort. To him, I looked like a frail, dying geriatric who belonged in a hospice care facility, not a young man in his mid-20s. We arrived at the park around 2:00 a.m. The park was dark, shadowed, and completely empty. I shuffled into the trees, my joints screaming with every single step I took. I found a secluded patch of earth beneath a massive oak tree, far away from the paved concrete paths. I dropped to my knees, gasping for air, my heart fluttering weakly in my chest. I took out the trowel and began to dig. I dug exactly 6 inches down, the symbolic depth of an ancient burial, the depth of the earth that covers a corpse's eyes. I took the silver coin out of my pocket. It was so cold now that the skin on my fingertips stuck to it, tearing slightly as I placed it into the bottom of the small pit. Next, I opened the sea salt. With shaking hands, I poured a thick, unbroken circle around the edge of the hole. I made sure there wasn't a single gap in the white grains. The internet thread swore that salt would trap the negative, Stygian energy of the underworld, cutting off its connection to the physical plane. Then I uncapped the spring water and poured it directly over the salt and the coin, symbolizing the washing away of the river Styx, cleansing the debt. Finally, I used my bare hands to push the cold dirt back into the hole, patting it down until the earth was flat and smooth again. I stood up, my spine cracking, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I turned around and began the long walk back to the park exit. "Don't look back," I repeated to myself like a mantra. "Whatever you do, do not look back." I kept my eyes locked on the distant city lights flickering through the trees. I didn't turn my head, not even when I heard a strange, wet splashing sound directly behind me, like someone stepping out of a dark, murky river. I kept walking. I made it out of the park, got into another cab, and went home. When I stepped back into my apartment, I felt a sudden, massive rush of relief. The heavy, unnatural chill in my chest suddenly vanished. The ambient, sticky 96-degree summer heat of New York hit me like a warm embrace. I rushed to the bathroom mirror and turned on the light. I wept with joy. My skin was smooth again. The deep, hollow wrinkles around my eyes had completely disappeared. The milky white film over my left eye was gone, and my vision was crystal clear. The gray streak in my hair had vanished, returning to its natural dark color. The ritual had worked. I had beaten the entity. I had outsmarted the ancient world with a modern urban defense trend. I laughed out loud in the empty apartment, feeling an overwhelming sense of triumph. I was safe. I walked back into my bedroom, stripped off my heavy winter clothes, and reached into the pocket of my jeans to grab my apartment keys so I could set them on the counter. My finger slipped into the denim pocket. The smile instantly froze on my face. My heart stopped beating entirely. Deep inside the bottom of the pocket, my fingertips brushed against something smooth, something heavy, something so violently, unimaginably cold that it instantly froze the blood in my hand. I slowly pulled my hand out. Resting in my palm, gleaming dully under the dim bedroom light, was the ancient silver obol. The salt circle burial hadn't worked. It had never worked. It was nothing more than a placebo, a piece of fake, hollow modern internet folklore born from forums and TikTok videos. You cannot trick a primordial cosmic force of the underworld with a cheap internet ritual. You cannot bypass a spiritual debt with a bag of grocery store sea salt and a bottle of spring water. And that's when the true, horrifying reality of the rules finally washed over me. Marcus's grandfather hadn't been talking about a puzzle to be solved. He was talking about a spiritual toll. To break the curse of the obol, you have to actually fix the rot that drew the coin to you in the first place. There are only 3 real ways to break it. The first is true, absolute atonement. You have to completely change your ways. You have to give up your greed, surrender your ill-gotten wealth, and dedicate your life to undoing every single piece of harm and exploitation you have ever caused to another human soul. The second way is to pass the coin to someone else, but not just anyone. It has to be passed to another person who is just as deeply corrupt, greedy, and parasitic as you are, continuing the vicious, terrible cycle of damnation. The third way is a literal pilgrimage. You have to physically travel across the world to Greece, find the exact desecrated ancient tomb from which the coin was plundered, and lay it back to rest on the eyes of the corpse it was stolen from. But as I sit here right now, I realize the ultimate cruel irony of my situation. I wasted all my time. I spent my precious remaining hours hiding, researching, and trying to find an easy way out. I spent my time looking for a shortcut, a hustle, a cheat code to beat the system, because that's exactly who I am. Even when my life was on the line, I tried to resolve it with a cheap trick instead of genuine change. And now my time is completely run out. It is day 3. The illusion of my youth has shattered. The wrinkles have returned, deeper and more painful than before. My lungs are burning, stiffening, struggling to draw even a single gasp of air. My joints are completely locked up. I can't move my legs anymore. I am trapped in this bed. The sticky summer heat of New York is completely gone. The room is dropping into the negatives. And from inside the walls of my apartment, I can hear a sound that doesn't belong in Manhattan. It's the slow, steady sound of water lapping against the wood of an old rotting boat. I can smell the stagnant, sulfurous stench of an ancient, forgotten river. The polite stranger is here. I can see the shadow of his expensive charcoal suit trousers breaking the line of light beneath my bedroom door. He isn't knocking anymore. He doesn't need to. I'm looking down at my right hand. The ancient silver coin is resting on my palm. It's so cold now that my skin is turning black beneath it. He's coming to collect the rest of his toll, and I have nothing left to pay him with except my soul. If you're out there in the city tonight, if you're chasing money, if you're cutting corners, if you're taking what isn't yours, watch your back. And if a polite man steps out of the crowd to offer you a piece of history, just run.